fought with his commanding officer all the time. He refused to show anyone authority except for his mother. And that was a big problem for all of his comrades. And Achilles had a lot of anger and rage. And he was fighting in Troy. But when his cousin Patroclus died, that was Achilles' test. That is what turned him into a hero. When he realized that his own selfishness, his rage, his anger, his personal glory caused the death of his best friend and cousin, that's when he got very, very upset and refocused on what exactly it was that he was doing in Troy. And by this I mean he became more focused with everybody else. He wasn't fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for the Greeks. So that's the second part of the way a hero evolves. You have a problem or a quest. Then you have a test of the hero's emotional, mental, or physical abilities. The third part is very, you can go two directions. It usually involves marrying a princess or the completion of a quest. A lot of heroes, especially if you think about Disney movies, a lot of the heroes at the end of a Disney movie will marry the princess. Simba in The Lion King married Nala at the end. The Beast ended up marrying Belle. It's part of the hero story. And Disney is actually a great example to understand the role of a hero, especially The Lion King. If you look at The Lion King, Simba left a long time ago to leave. He left Pride Rock, he left everything because he thought he was responsible for his dad's death. He had a test when he met Nala, and then after he fought and defeated Scar, he ended up marrying her and then ruled over Pride Rock. Every Disney movie follows this archetype of the hero, which is a great example of seeing at least the American interpretation of what a hero is. So with Achilles, the completion of his quest, it was different. He killed Hector because Hector killed Patroclus. And then he took Hector's body and wouldn't allow it to be buried, which is a very important thing in Greek customs. No matter who your enemy is or what you do, you always allow your opponent to bury the bodies of their comrades. So instead of marrying a princess, Achilles' defining moment as a hero before he gets killed is his meeting with Hector's father, Priam. It's a very emotional meeting because Priam sneaks into Achilles' tent and begs for his son's body. He says that you are my enemy now, you will be my enemy tomorrow, just as you were my enemy yesterday, but give me this honor of burying my son. And Achilles could have said no. He could have said no, and he could have killed Priam and ended the Trojan War right there, but he said yes. He sacrificed for himself. He showed weakness in front of an enemy, and he allowed the person who was the father of Hector, being the guy who killed Achilles' best friend, he allowed Hector's father to take his body out of respect. And that was sort of the end of Achilles' process. If we want to get more complicated heroes, we can look at King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and how he established Camelot and went about finding all these different knights and the challenges he had, and eventually his betrayal by Lancelot. We could also look at Hercules. Hercules is probably the most famous Greek hero outside of Achilles. Hercules was the son of Zeus and Alcmene, who was a human. And Hercules was also very angry, very brutal. Hercules wasn't a good guy. He was very, very strong, but he had a lot of problems, and he wanted to become a god. He wanted his right to go up to Olympus and sit with Zeus. But he didn't lack he lacked courage, self-sacrifice. He never did things for the good of other people. He had multiple wives. He was a big womanizer. He drank a lot. And so Zeus told Hercules, you have to become a better person. You have to be worthy of being a god. And so Hercules was given 7 different quests, 7 different tasks that he had to do to show that he was worthy. Each of these tasks involved Hercules doing something for someone else. And each one of these follows the story. He goes on a quest, he has a test, and then he has a resolution where he then becomes a hero. He learns something, he grows. So over the course of these 7 trials, Hercules becomes a hero. He learns self-sacrifice. He learns courage. He displays courage. He protects the weak. And eventually he would fight for the good of humanity. And that's just what he achieves moral excellence, like all these other heroes. Like Achilles before him, Hercules achieves excellence. Perseus is the same way. Perseus fights the Minotaur. Perseus kills Medusa. But he eventually becomes a great warrior. He does it for his family. He fights for love, for honor. He was a good hero from the start. So there's all these different heroes. And in old Greek times, heroes had a cult of personality, which means that there were temples dedicated and devoted to these heroes, and people would worship them. They would ask Hercules for strength, or Achilles for strength, or strength from Hector. This is what they did. Today, we do have a similar phenomena. If we want to look at modern day heroes, we'll see them in movies. Where before we would see heroes in books and in stories. Homer's Iliad was an epic poem. We'll look at heroes today in a movie setting. And in a movie setting, it follows a bit more of a structured and predictable archetype. In a modern movie, the hero is often just an ordinary person. They go to work, they wake up, they eat food. There's nothing special about them. However then, extraordinary circumstances do happen, and they are stuck. They don't know, they have to, despite the odds that are against them, they have to fight them. They have to have endurance, they have to be smart, they have to be noble, virtuous, and they suffer. But in the end, they always win. Sometimes by a little, sometimes by a lot, but they learn a lot of things in their quest to better themselves. And the hero is usually going up against villains. A villain is the opposite of a hero. In modern day movies, every hero has a villain and the hero fights him, the hero wins. Sometimes there's problems, sometimes there's not. The villain will usually be charismatic, which means they're very charming, they're very likable, but they're just very, very evil. They might dress nice, they might talk very, very wonderfully. These brilliant words, they have a great taste in culture. But he is the main villain for today's movies and today's heroes. He either represents, leads, or is part of the struggle the hero is up against. And we'll look at three examples that everybody should know. The first is being Harry Potter. Everybody knows who Harry Potter is. The books are very, very famous. And we'll look at Harry Potter as a person. So Harry Potter was just a normal boy living on Privet Drive, and he found out he was a wizard. He goes to Hogwarts, he learns a lot about himself, he learns about his family, which is most important to him. He always wants to know who his family is, what his dad is like, why Voldemort was trying to kill them. He wants to know all of this. And that's who he meets. That's his villain, is Voldemort. So in this case, Voldemort has a lot of supporters. He doesn't look nice, but he is charismatic. He does have supporters who are all trying to kill Harry Potter. And in the end, Harry Potter wins. But Voldemort is the struggle. He represents everything that Harry Potter is trying to destroy. And Harry Potter wins. Another example I'd like to use right now is both Bilbo and Frodo Baggins. They are ordinary little hobbits who, in the case of Bilbo, a bunch of dwarves come to his house and he has to go on a quest to kill a dragon named Smaug. And on that quest, he grows a lot as a hero. And his villain is Smaug. Smaug is part of the struggle that Bilbo is against. Smaug was the problem, but the main quest was to recapture this mountain for the dwarves. And that was what was happening. And with Frodo, it's a bit more complicated, but same thing. Frodo, just a normal hobbit, he wants to follow in his uncle Bilbo's footsteps and go on an adventure. And so what he does is he has to take this ring, this evil ring, go to a volcano and throw it in there and just burn it. Like, game over, gone. But along Frodo's way, he meets a lot of different villains. He has more than one, and they each represent something different. We have, for example, Gollum or Sméagol, who is part of the struggle of the ring. You have Saruman, the wizard, who is also part of this struggle. But the whole total evil will be Sauron. He'll have the big red floating eye. He is the evil that we have to, that Frodo is trying to destroy. If he comes back, the world is all going to be at war, things aren't going to be great, Middle-earth will be in chaos, and only the elves will live happily. So the last example that I want to use, which is personally my favorite, is Luke Skywalker from Star Wars. Now Luke Skywalker encounters two droids out of nowhere. They just show up. They're looking for someone he knows, Obi-Wan Kenobi, old Ben, and he goes and meets him. He meets Ben Kenobi and gets drawn into this very strong galactic conflict. And he doesn't understand what exactly he got into. He knows that he wants to be a Jedi like his father. He doesn't know that his father is really Darth Vader. And so he goes on this quest and he blows up the Death Star. In the second movie, he meets up with Yoda and they train a lot together. And this is where Luke faces his test, is when he goes to Cloud City to save his friends. When he goes there, he meets Darth Vader. And Vader and him have a lightsaber duel. Vader is impressed with his abilities, and he cuts off Luke's hand and admits that he is Luke's father. That was Luke's test. He went through it. He didn't like it at all. But what makes Luke a hero is in the third movie, not only does he rescue and save his friends, he goes back to try to convince his father to be good again. And that is what makes Luke a hero. He could have easily have killed Darth Vader when he wanted to, and it would have been no problem. But he wants to convince Vader that Vader is still a good man, that he still is Anakin Skywalker, and that he can be good if he wants him to. And we do see Darth Vader at the end kills the Emperor when the Emperor is trying to kill Luke. Vader does become a redeemed figure. Vader becomes a good guy at the end, even though it costs him his life. And, like I said earlier, the most famous example of a modern day hero would be Superman. And this brings me on to the next part of my presentation. Now that we've talked about the origin of heroes, given a few examples of old Greek heroes in antiquity, I want to look now at how we view heroes today. We did that a little bit with movies, but that was mostly to iterate the growth of a hero in something that we can understand. I don't think most listeners have studied Greek mythology, but that's a great place to go. But you need an example. So now, I'm going to talk about superheroes. Now, superhero is super. The word literally just means extraordinary superhuman powers dedicated to protecting the public. And that very, very first and very, very famous superhero is Superman. He has a costume. He fights for truth, justice, and the American way. That's what he does. He wears a cape. He fights for the good. He uses his power to fight a day-to-day crime, such as bank robbers and muggers and corrupt politicians. but he also uses his powers to fight threats against humanity. He has several arch villains. He has a lot of aliens that are stronger than him, but he does it because he's Superman. He is displaying courage, self-sacrifice, and adversity. He is the ultimate Boy Scout. He is the best guy. And he requires a lot of powers. He uses all his powers for good. And that's what he does, and that's what he wants to do, and that's what he will continue to do. Superman will always do that. But there are other heroes that people might be familiar with. The Avengers. They fighting for humanity in the movie. Iron Man is very, very popular. Spider-Man is popular. Batman is also very popular. And so, because these are in comic books, the storytelling is a bit different. You have different writers, different storylines, and every person writes their hero in a different way. So, for example, superheroes in comics will have supervillains. Now, a supervillain is a recurring villain. Most famous example is Batman's supervillain is the Joker. And that's what they do. They fight a lot, they're seen a lot, because like I mentioned earlier, it's a comic. They have to write different stories, either in small little episodes or very, very big story arcs. And the superhero will always be different in these. So many superheroes have these traits. Extraordinary powers or abilities. Much like old Greeks, who were the children of gods, modern day superheroes have extraordinary powers. And if they don't have powers, they have abilities. Like both Batman and Iron Man don't have any power. But the powers that they do have, and if they don't have the exceptional skills or the advanced equipment, they will have a superpower. And these superpowers vary very, very widely. For example, superhuman strength, that's the ability to be very, very strong. The ability to fly, enhanced senses, so the ability to see or to hear or to smell, to touch, way, way better than the average human, is a trait that these heroes do have. Now, when it comes to, and then the last thing is the projection of energy bolts. Being able to shoot electricity or fire or some sort of magic stuff out of their hands makes them, these are part of these extraordinary powers that we don't have. Like I said earlier, some superheroes like Batman, Green Arrow, Hawkeye, and the Question have no superhuman powers, but they have mastered skills to a degree that we will never be able to. Mainly the skills of martial arts and forensic science. Others, however, will have special weapons or technology, like Iron Man. Tony Stark isn't a good fighter. He doesn't, he's not a great detective. He's just very, very smart, and he uses his intelligence as a weapon in the form of his suit. Thor has a weather manipulating hammer. In the comic books he does. In the actual movie, Thor is more of a god, but in the comic books, Thor is a man who got a hammer. And the last would be Green Lantern's ring. Green Lantern uses his ring to make his imagination, his reality, come true, and he fights crime with this. Every one of these superheroes I just mentioned does display the traits of courage and self-sacrifice that I stressed so much earlier. And the last is that some superheroes will supplement, by that I mean add on to their natural ability with a special weapon or device. The easiest example would be Wolverine. His adamantium claws and bones are a supplement to his healing power. Another thing that makes heroes very, very different than, or the superheroes very, very different than old Greek heroes, is a strong moral code, which usually includes a willingness to risk one's own safety in the service of good without expectation or reward. This is just like Hector earlier. Superman doesn't save people for money or for statues. He saves people because it's the right thing for him to do. But this code will often, for most heroes, include a refusal to kill or wield lethal weapons. So a lot of these heroes don't kill people. They do their best not to. Even Superman who is very, very strong and could kill people very, very easily, doesn't. These heroes will also have motivation. It will be a sense of responsibility, a formal calling, a personal vendetta against criminals, or a strong belief in justice and humanitarian service. Whatever it is, they have a motivation to fight crime, and it's usually stressed. They will talk about it a lot, and that's what they do. The most obvious thing that separates superheroes from the Greek heroes of old is their identity. Today, or back in the Greeks' times, everybody knew who Achilles and Hector were while they were fighting. People knew Achilles was the son of a god. Everybody knew that. However, a superhero has a secret identity, which allows the superhero's friends and family to avoid becoming targets by that hero's enemies. This has happened a lot to Spider-Man, actually. He has had his identity revealed and has had loved ones close to him die because of it. But some heroes do reveal their identities. Iron Man and Captain America are well known, whether or not they're wearing their suits. Everybody knows who the Fantastic Four are. It's just part of the modern day superhero. Very, very few heroes will allow their identity to become publicly known, but if they do, they embrace it, or they don't have other people that they care about. There's costume, it's part of their secret identity, and that costume usually has a theme. And that's the part that is really, really fun. Batman has a bat-themed costume. He uses bat-themed gadgets, and he works at night. Spider-Man uses webs and has a spider-looking costume, and he has other spider-like abilities. Those are just examples of a superhero's costume and their identity. Another thing that modern-day superheroes will have, and I mentioned this earlier, is a supervillain. But not just a supervillain, it's what we like to call a rogues gallery, which means that they have multiple villains that they fight on occasion. So for example, Batman fights on a regular basis in the comic books the Penguin, the Riddler, Two-Face, Joker, Killer Croc, Ra's al Ghul. There's a lot of villains that Batman fights. Those are his rogue gallery. And that's just Bane. But every hero has one. And it's a group of villains that during the comics, when they're by themselves, they will run into a lot. The X-Men had Magneto, Apocalypse, the Quinn. They had a lot of different villains. And usually these villains are part of the hero. By that I mean, well, let's look at the example of Batman. Batman is often accused of creating the villains he fights. They say that because of Batman's antics, the way that he dresses up, he creates these villains by just being who he is. If we look at Spider-Man, Spider-Man had a villain named the Scorpion who was created to defeat Spider-Man perfectly. So not only do all these heroes have an arch-enemy, so for Batman that would be the Joker, they also have a lot of other villains that they have to fight. But modern day stories will also have independent not stories. Modern day heroes will also have independent wealth, headquarters, a backstory. Most of the backstories are tragic accidents or freak accidents that result in the development of the hero's ability. But what's becoming more and more popular today in comics is to have heroes working in a team, where each one can use their abilities to the best of their power. For example, there's the Fantastic Four, the DNA agents, the X-Men, the Avengers, the Justice League of America. They all are a team of people dedicated to working together to protect others. And when they're not working in a big group like that, they might have a sidekick. Like Batman and Robin. They have they are, Batman is the boss, Robin is the sidekick. Captain America and Bucky. Captain America is the boss, Bucky is the sidekick. But it should be noted, however, that a sidekick is a different classification of a superhero. Usually sidekicks aren't as smart or aren't as brilliant or resourceful as the heroes that they follow. And they often serve as a plot device to get the hero into more trouble than he can deal with at the time. So now we talked about superheroes are very, very popular, and we just talked a little bit about them. What I want to do now is move on to modern day heroes. So it's really easy to talk about heroes. If you're an indestructible, godlike being who doesn't feel pain, who can't be hurt, it's very, very easy to do good things for other people. However, life isn't like that. Real people are vulnerable, real people are weak, and it takes a certain kind of person to become a hero, to display courage and self-sacrifice, and all for the good of all humanity. And one that I want to introduce is a very, very important and well-known American hero, Martin Luther King Jr. Now, Martin Luther King was very, very famous because of the civil rights movement. In the 1960s in America, discrimination against black people still existed. Martin Luther King helped end that a lot. He was an advocate for the end of segregation. Segregation meaning white people and black people should be able to live together, do what they want, they'd be friends, whatever. That's what he was an advocate against. He didn't believe in segregation. He thought everybody should be equal. And he has a very, very famous speech, I have a dream speech. And he did that. And he became he sacrificed so much for himself. No, not for himself. He sacrificed so much for other people. And eventually he was killed. Martin Luther King was assassinated because of his ability to make people follow him and listen to him. So some people got scared, and now he is no longer with us. Another example I want to use that doesn't quite work today, but might be more familiar to my Russian listeners, is Lenin. Lenin is viewed, or was viewed in the Soviet Union as a hero of socialism. The Tsar's regime was very corrupt, and they had lost a lot of men in World War I. Lenin decided to change all that and had the Bolshevik Revolution, overthrew the Tsar's government, and established the Soviet Union. He sacrificed a lot of what he believed in for the will of the people. And that's why some people view Lenin as a hero, because this is what he did. He was never in power long enough for history to judge him accurately. We don't know. We know he displayed self-sacrifice and courage, but if he was just doing that because he was a politician, or because he really meant it, we probably will not know. But yeah, so Martin Luther King and Vladimir Lenin. Those are heroes. They don't wear uniforms. They don't have fancy capes. They don't have any special powers. They are real people trying to be real people and do things for the better of humanity. So the last one I want to look at is heroes in the military. Now this is a very interesting phenomena in American culture, because in American culture a soldier is usually seen as a hero. Because we do not have mandatory conscription, the way that we do, Russia does. And so everybody, no, not everyone in America has to join the army. And the idea of the American soldier is the American soldier is fighting for truth and democracy and freedom. And you can see in this picture right here, it's an American soldier holding the hand of a little boy. Now, because heroes are so well respected in America, soldiers. Because soldiers are so well respected in America, we usually give them these abilities. A soldier displays courage. He has the will to sacrifice him or herself. They definitely fight weakness. They definitely fight adversity while they are in a weak position. That's the life of a soldier. And that's what soldiers do. So we view soldiers as heroes in America. I don't know if the same is in Russia, but in America, a soldier is definitely seen as a hero and respected as one. So to just summarize everything I talked about, we started with the origin of heroes, from the word heros. We talked a bit about Greek mythology, about Achilles and Hector, how heroes were seen then as the children of demigods, and how there was that distinction between old Greek heroes and modern day superheroes and movie action heroes about self-sacrifice. But how a hero back then doesn't want to do anything for anyone but himself. Where today, all heroes want to do is focus on other people. We talked about the hero archetype, the departure on a quest, the test, and then the completion of the challenge. And to iterate this archetype, I brought up the examples of Achilles and Hector. And then we talked about movies and what a modern hero looks like. And a modern hero follows almost the exact same path. They're a bit more focused on society and the betterment of humanity than they are on themselves. But if we look at these, the examples I brought up were Harry Potter, Bilbo Baggins, and Luke Skywalker. These three individuals follow the hero archetype perfectly. That's what they wanted to do, that's what they do. No problem. So last but not least, we talked about, well, not last but not least, but next on our agenda, we talked about superheroes. And superheroes being what, in comics, and all having a certain godlike, indestructible power to them. And so for a superhero, it's very, very easy to fight for humanity. Because you have superpowers, you are above normal, you are the best at what you do, and therefore it should not be a problem. We talked about Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and Iron Man. We talked about extraordinary powers or abilities, a strong moral code, a motivation, a secret identity, a costume that goes with a theme, sidekicks, rogue character, or rogue galley, basically the villains, wealth, all of this. And the last thing we talked about were modern day heroes. And I gave two examples of a modern day hero, of people who don't have all these things. They are not special, they're not different, they're not better than us. But they do better things than we do. Because that is part of being human. is we have this ability to fight through it. We can sacrifice ourselves for the betterment of other people, and those are just some examples. Martin Luther King, Vladimir Lenin, and professional soldiers. They are all trying to protect what they believe in, and unlike the comic book, it's not always easy. Trying to fight for what you believe in might be the wrong thing to fight for, but that's a conversation for another time. Our time is up right now. Thank you very much for listening. Once again, my name is Thomas Mills, and this concludes the webinar on heroes and heroism. Thank you very much.